This is why it's easier a lot of times to deal with false doctrine kind of offline, to be like, okay, let's look at the whole picture. So if you're engaging in, if you're looking at somebody, if you're listening to something and you know it's coming from a false teacher, you know that this guy is lying or this gal is lying, you're not entirely sure how he's lying. You might even, pause the video and try to focus in. You're like, okay, what part of this is not biblical? What part of this is not, is not factually true? And the temptation is going to be, and the exact goal of the misdirection is going to be to look at the shocking thing, to say, this shocking thing must not be true. It could very well be that that shocking thing is true and it's being presented in a way that's especially shocking. And the goal of this is to get you to look away from the other details, the more mundane details that make this argument fall apart. For this reason, it's more difficult to deal with these kinds of false teachers in person because they will rattle off, again, let's say it's an 80-20 sentence. They'll rattle off a sentence that is 80% correct, 80% truthful, and the 20% undermines the rest of the sentence because it is just not true. But if you're in the moment and you get caught up in that 80% of the sentence and you just can't figure out, like, I know this guy is lying somehow, like, I know that she's lying somehow, she's not telling the truth, she's claiming something that's absolutely not true, but I can't figure out where it is. This is why it's easier a lot of times to deal with false doctrine kind of offline, to be like, okay, let's look at the whole picture. What is the whole of what this person is teaching? If this is the Bethel, if this is Stephen Furtick, if this is, any one of these number of false prophets, false teachers, false apostles, these kinds of guys and gals that show up, it's helpful to take a step back and to break it down like you're diagramming a sentence even. You say, okay, look, this part at least is correct. This part is true. It does not necessarily follow that the rest of the sentence is true, but I can distinguish, I can look at the nuance and say, this amount is true, this amount is false. That's how the sentence is false altogether. So as a Christian, you may be familiar with the truth. And when you hear false teachers, you may instinctively know, you're like, I know that this person is lying, but you might not know how. So my recommendation is, one, find out who these false teachers are and, share it with other people. You're like, okay, look, this guy is a false teacher and I can show you an example of how he's a false teacher. And she's a false teacher. And let me break down what she's teaching and how this makes her a false teacher. Once you get that pattern, you're like, okay, this person is lying and I just have to figure out how. That makes things easier from there. Can't trust what this person is saying. So I'm going to take what they say and I'm going to examine it and I'm going to look at it closely. So this is how you end up having these sneaky false teachers really peddling dog water doctrine and getting people to believe these things. He's not impossible to discern the devil's lies, but he is clever. So as Christians, you need to be wise as serpents and as gentle as doves, as innocent as doves.